Hello, my name is Carol Schall, and I am with the Virginia Commonwealth University Autism Center for Excellence. I come to you today to talk about the Autism Program Environment Rating Scale. We are using this tool in our VCU ACE model classrooms to improve practice for individuals with autism spectrum disorders. I am the director of the Technical Assistance Division at VCU ACE, and I'd like to thank Stacy Carr for her participation in preparing this webcast today. In today's webcast, we'll be reviewing the systems change model that we use in the school divisions with whom we work. In addition, while we're doing that, we're going to review the Autism Program Environment Rating Scale. This tool was developed at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill through their National Professional Development Center on Autism Spectrum Disorders. In the context of talking about the APERS, we will demonstrate how you use the APERS to improve classroom implementation of evidence-based practices. And then finally, we will review the results that we have from our pre- and post-test findings using the APERS for students with autism spectrum disorders. For more information about the APERS, I want you to know that the best contact is Dr. Ann Cox at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Frank Porter Graham Child Development Center. Her contact information is on the screen now. As we talk about the VCU ACE Technical Assistance model, I want to review the model of change. We have covered this in previous webcasts, but in preparations for today's work, it's important for us to review how we go about our work. As you know, our mission at VCU ACE is to improve statewide capacity in serving individuals with ASD, thereby improving the outcomes available to those individuals. We work on helping people understand and present evidence-based practices to fidelity so that individuals with autism spectrum disorders can achieve their full human potential. We started this with our first cohort. And our first cohort involved a number of school divisions, but we felt a little like this cartoon that you're looking at right now. It felt to us like we were actually designing the plane as we were flying it. Nevertheless, we learned a tremendous amount about how best to help school divisions change practice and improve the use of evidence-based practices in their divisions. What we do in the context of these projects is we help school divisions improve their services in the special education area for children and youth with autism spectrum disorders. We do that by embedding technical assistance staff in divisions, providing ongoing program assessment. We help them strategically plan for the changes they desire to make, and then we collaborate with them intensively to achieve those changes. Our strategic planning involves the development of SMART goals, the embedment of training available to the division. We have training in addition to coaching because, as we've all learned through the years, training alone doesn't seem to influence practice much at all. It's training combined with coaching and then sharing that information through professional learning groups that really seems to make the difference in terms of systems change within school divisions. Finally, we use an ongoing feedback evaluation loop to continue to provide information to the divisions about the success that they've been achieving with their students with ASD. As we move into Cohort 2, we now feel like we have a model that is well developed, and we now have data to demonstrate the success of that model, both anecdotal and quantitative data. Again, as review, our regional efforts and our statewide efforts mirror the work that we're completing in our school division. When we work with our communities of learning and autism, and we work on statewide goals, we are also influencing practice. But our greatest influence happens through our work within school divisions themselves. Today, we're going to focus on our work with school divisions. And as a reminder, we refer to our model as a top-down, bottom-up approach. The orange arrow represents the bottom-up portion of our work. And in this area, we improve classroom practice and school practice through the use of evidence-based practices. And yet, if that was all we would do, that work would be short-lived. Because in order for real change to occur for individuals with autism spectrum disorder, we have to work from the top down as well. And that involves increasing administrative support to teachers and paraprofessionals who serve individuals with autism in the school division. It is both the pressure from the bottom up and the top down model that makes real change occur in school divisions and leads to sustainable change and growth. As we're working in the school divisions, we begin with assessment. Most of today's webcast will focus on that assessment. Beyond assessment, we facilitate the team so that they can develop an Autism Services Improvement Plan. This plan is a strategic plan that's developed to address the unique needs and the unique vision and goals of the division in question. No two Autism Service Improvement Plans are alike. Nevertheless, we can track change on any of those using the Autism Program Environment Rating Scale. We then provide embedded technical assistance, which involves a series of coaching, professional development, and strategic planning to assist the division. Finally, we develop a transition plan to assist that division in moving from being dependent upon their technical assistance provider to being independent in guiding their own systems change efforts. In our Cohort 2, we are now including the divisions on the screen before you right now. We are working with 6 different divisions with 145 different schools and 1,316 individuals with ASD within the division between K through 12. In our previous cohort, we worked with 9 different projects in 12 different divisions. That represented 254 schools and 1,834 individuals with autism spectrum disorder. As I mentioned, we are working intensively right now with our Cohort 2 school divisions to develop their Autism Services Improvement Team, to conduct baseline assessments. We've reviewed those results with that team, and in a summer academy, we completed a gap analysis between their vision of where they wish they were and their current assessment based on where they are. It is that gap where we begin to build the bridge using goals. At this point, we're in the development of the goals within the divisions, and we're hitting the road running when it comes to implementation of the Autism Services Improvement Plan. As I mentioned earlier, the major way that we will provide support to these school divisions and evaluation is through the use of the Autism Program Environment Rating Scale. This scale was designed to assess the quality of programs for children and youth with ASD. It was developed by the National Professional Development Center on Autism Spectrum Disorders. The purpose of the APERS is to provide school divisions a way to measure the effects and the implementation of quality programs for individuals with autism spectrum disorder. And it is a multi-level observational tool that includes an interview, an extensive observation, and a review of documents surrounding students in either self-contained or inclusive environments. The goal is to assess the entire divisions related to program quality, learner goals and present levels, learner strengths, interests and history, and team member knowledge. This assessment leads to the selection of evidence-based practices that the division will implement to fidelity. By implementing these, we continue to monitor the program quality and the learner outcomes. These then feed back into the revision of the implementation plan for the evidence-based practices. So this feedback loop of assessment to implementation to outcome evaluation results in the real model that will result in long-term and sustainable systems change. The APERS, Autism Program Environment Rating Scale, is comprised of 11 domains with subdomains as well. Right now I'm going to review those domains and subdomains. They are split up into the next 3 slides. When completing the APERS, team members go in and observe to assess the learning environment, the positive learning climate, the assessment and IEP development process, and curriculum instruction within the classroom. The subdomains in each of these domains are listed below them. For example, under positive learning climate, the individual administrators of the tool would observe student and staff interactions, staff behaviors, and the degree to which the classroom promotes diversity within the classroom itself. Another example would be in the area of assessment and IEP development. The subdomains there include student progress, assessment process, IEP goals, and transition planning. Additional domains include communication, social competence, personal independence, and functional behavior. These 4 domains are very specifically targeted to the core deficits associated with autism spectrum disorders. In fact, all 4 of these domains represent, in some ways, the most important domains to address when supporting individuals with autism spectrum disorders. The entire tool is targeted to individuals with autism, but these 4 in particular get at the unique challenges that individuals with autism present in school and classroom environments. Finally, the tool assesses the degree to which families are involved, the teaming present among team members within the school division, and for middle and high school only, the transition planning process. As opposed to the subdomain related to transition in the IEP category, which addresses the passing on of information from classroom to classroom, teacher to teacher, and even within the day, teacher to paraprofessional. This transition planning domain refers to the transition plan from school to adulthood, whether it be school to employment or school to post-secondary education. These domains and subdomains comprise the areas reviewed by the Autism Program Environment Rating Scale, or the APERS. Within each of these subdomains, there are indicators throughout that measure the quality of the program present. There are 66 indicators total. These indicators are rated on a rubric rating scale between 1 and 5. Generally speaking, a score of 1 and 2 indicates the need for improvement in that particular indicator. A score of 3 indicates proficiency in that indicator. And a score of 4 or 5 indicates exemplary practice in that indicator. On the screen before you right now are some sample indicators that are within the subdomains. For example, classroom materials are in good condition and good order. This is an example of an indicator that's taken from the classroom environment domain of the rating scale. Students are regularly prepared for transition and disruptions in routine. That comes from the curriculum and instruction. Team members use a variety of instructional formats, including teacher-led, student-led, small group, large group, and one-to-one teaching experiences. This section comes from the curriculum and instruction domain. And then finally, team members create opportunities within the classroom for activities for students to respond to or initiate communication. This indicator comes from the communication domain. These 4 different indicators are just a sample of the 66 indicators contained in the tool. When scoring the tool, an observer would begin by considering the indicators listed at the 3-point level. If the indicators were observed in the program in question, then the observer would check all indicators observed and move to the 5-point level of the scale. If the indicators at the 3-point level were not present, the observer would move to the indicators contained within the 1-point level of the rating scale and check all of those that were observed. I have examples on the next few pages. In this example, we're looking at a social competence middle and high school domain. In this, we're looking at the rich communication environment subdomain. Imagine that you observed a classroom in a middle or a high school within a school division in Virginia, and you observed frequent opportunities that were planned for students to interact with their peers. And they could be peers in the classroom or peers in the school building themselves. You would check that particular indicator. You needn't start at 1. You start at 3 and check there. Let's imagine that you also observed that some support was provided to enable students to interact with their peers, that this support didn't interrupt the interaction between the peers. So you check that. You then would move on to number 5. In this part of the rubric, let's imagine that you observed frequent opportunities that were planned for students to interact successfully with typically developing peers. Let's imagine that this were a high school where students regularly attend classes with their peers without disabilities. Then you would check that because of the inclusive nature of the program. Let's imagine, though, that you observed that most of the interactions between students without disabilities and their peers with autism spectrum disorder required support from a paraprofessional. You would not be able to check that. The tool itself would rate your checks as a 4. So on this indicator, out of a possible 5 points, this program achieved 4 points. Looking at the preschool and elementary communication domain, we're going to also look at a similar indicator for rich communication environment. Let's imagine that you observe in this preschool classroom, and as you're observing, you see that the teachers are responding to students' attempts to communicate, but that the communication devices mainly sit on a shelf, and they're only brought out when the teacher wants to hear from the student. They're not available to the student to use independently to either initiate or attempt to initiate communication. Well, you were able to check the first indicator in the 3-point block, but you had to go back to the 1 because you didn't see the second indicator in the 3-point block. So moving back to the 1-point indicator, you say, yes, team members interrupt communication attempts. When a student gets out of their seat and attempts to get a communication device, you see the teacher interrupting that student and moving them back to their seat. Then you would check that one. In this example, even though you had 1 indicator checked at the 3-point level, the score assigned to this particular rating would be a 1. Again, this is automatically rated by the tool itself. By completing the entire tool, you'll get a report that gives you both the overall scores in each domain and then gives you a graphic representation of the findings related to the Autism Program Environment Rating Scale. As you can see again, you can see that the number 3 represents proficient, and that is this phase line right in the middle of the graph. This line is the top score, or a 5. By looking at this, you can see that as it relates to family involvement, this particular program did quite well. In fact, they're nearly at the highest score they could achieve as it relates to family involvement. You can also see that they are above and slightly above proficient in the areas of learning environment and positive learning climate. But when you look at the rest of the scores on the APERS, there is a need for improvement in terms of the implementation of evidence-based practice for students with ASD. This is particularly true in the area of personal independence and competence. In fact, this shows the overall domain results. But by looking at this, we can actually then go to that graph indicating this particular performance area. We can look at personal independence and competence and then see a graph indicating why this score was particularly low and particularly in need of improvement. And by looking at the personal independence and competence subdomain, what we see is that personal independence is still low, but some indicators were present. Self-management, however, was not present at all. If I were intervening in this program, I would highlight the need to teach the staff managing this program how to encourage more self-management to the students in this environment. I could also go to the specific indicators within the personal improvement and competence area. And on the screen before you right now are some of those exact indicators related to personal independence and competence. For example, these are the 3-point or the proficient indicators indicating that the program is encouraging personal independence and competence in the students in their program. These include accommodations, including extra time, timer, token board, wait symbol, first then board, etc., to at least 2 activities or routines to maximize student ability to complete tasks independently. The next indicator in this area includes that key team members teach students to advocate for themselves independently by requesting modifications when appropriate. By teaching these 2 indicators, I would automatically improve the score on the Autism Program Environment Rating Scale. Also in this area of personal competence, or personal independence, are these 2 indicators. Team members use at least 2 strategies to promote personal independence in routines, and they might include picture schedules, transition objects, checklists, iPads, electronic organizers, notebooks, binders, calendars, daily planners. And when supporting students, team members position themselves far enough away to give students the opportunity to function independently, but close enough to provide support when needed. In fact, if you're reviewing a program where there is a lot of paraprofessional involvement, this area might be an area that you need to highlight so that the paraprofessionals learn to stay far enough away to encourage independence, but close enough to provide prompting when it's needed. In the area of self-management, you can look at the indicators in the bottom 2 white blocks. In the first one, it talks about strategies to promote self-management in students, including helping students recognize and label their behavior, helping students evaluate how they performed, including reinforcement process, and keeping track of class grades in the student's ability. Students also should be involved in self-determination and self-management skills and strategies during team meetings. In other words, by providing some coaching and training in how to implement these strategies, you would greatly improve the self-management score in the personal independence and competence domain. Finally, you could also ensure that students are involved in planning school-based activities on a regular basis. And that would include transitions between classrooms, setting up their own individual classwork, identifying the supports they need between classes, and then designing portable schedules. And then finally, providing opportunities for students to engage in productive, meaningful activities during downtime. All of these indicate that students are self-managing and able to monitor their own behavior and their own activities throughout the day. These indicators would indicate that the classroom and the program is proficient at encouraging personal independence and competence on behalf of the students. By analyzing these domains, subdomains, and indicators, you're able to make targeted changes. In other words, without an assessment, you might just do an environmental scan of your programs and decide on topics based on the availability of expertise in your area. But by using an assessment tool that assists you in identifying the needs within your specific program, you can identify which performance indicators you need to improve to increase and improve the outcomes for your individuals with ASD. So all of those program indicators are either very strong, as represented by the bigger dots, or in need of improvement, or somewhere in the middle. And by improving and addressing those specific indicators that have the greatest impact on the overall outcomes of students with ASD, you're able to improve your program. We have used the APERS in numerous ways within our Autism Center for Excellence programs. On the slide before you right now are a number of the ways that we have used the APERS to inform practice. At the individual student level, we've been able to identify the supports that are present and the supports that are needed for particular students in both self-contained and inclusive environments. We've actually used this tool in some school divisions to identify individual teacher performance goals for the year. We're able to identify and reinforce and praise teachers for the strengths within their classrooms, and then identified areas where coaching was needed and professional development was needed by individual teachers. As it relates to classroom teams and programs, we can identify overall strengths and develop training plans for the entire team. And then finally, at the school division level, we're able to identify places in the division where exemplary practice exists and devote resources to areas where growth is needed. Using the APERS allows for a strategic deployment of professional development dollars throughout the division by targeting those areas where improvement would result in improved outcomes for students. We took the liberty on these two slides of color-coding the graphs slightly differently to give the division a better picture of their overall performance. We use the preschool elementary version of the Autism Program Environment Rating Scale to look at a number of different preschool and elementary classes in both self-contained and inclusion settings. We also did the same thing at the middle and high school level using the middle and high school version of the APERS. We used yellow to indicate scores that were proficient. Green indicated the scores that were exemplary, and blue indicated the scores that needed improvement. By looking at this, the division can make some decisions about where to begin their professional development for a given school year. In fact, this division identified significant needs around assessment and IEP development, communication, and functional behavior. Now, to be sure, there are other needs in the division, but these were the areas that showed the greatest need in the preschool and elementary area. As it related to the middle and high school area, the scores were slightly higher in this division, but they again identified communication. And in high school, they also identified personal independence and competence as areas needing growth. This assisted them in, rather than following fads and bringing in the latest speaker on the latest model or the latest tools, they were able to really ask for very specific goals for their staff as it related to their professional development. Finally, this division across both preschool, elementary, middle, and high school was very good at involving families in planning. And so using that as a strength, they turned to family members to participate on their strategic planning team. Now I'm going to shift to our third goal in this presentation, and that is to review the results that we had from our first cohort in our VCU ACE Technical Assistance divisions. The Virginia map before you shows where those programs were located. We provided services through VCU ACE in Arlington, Botetourt, Greensville, Hampton, Henrico, Newport News, Northern Neck Regional Special Education Program, represented by these 3 stars, Richmond City Public Schools, and Wise County. As you can see, there's a fair distribution throughout the state. This distribution allowed us to serve both very large and very small school divisions. We also had a fair representation of urban, suburban, and rural school divisions. So we really feel like we were able to access and provide supports to the breadth of divisions across Virginia. In this program, we completed a pretest using the APERS in 33 specific classrooms. We then followed up by completing a post-test in those same 33 classrooms at the end of 3 years of intervention. The divisions where we completed the pre and post-test included Botetourt, Hampton, Newport News, Richmond County, which is in the Northern Neck, Lancaster County, and Richmond City in the Richmond area, and then finally Wise County. We included 5 preschool classrooms, 12 elementary, 7 middle, and 9 high school classrooms. And then finally, these results represented 21 self-contained and 12 inclusive classroom environments. As you look at this slide, the red bars on top next to each domain represent the pretest score on the Autism Program Environment Rating Scale. The blue bars underneath the red bars next to each domain represent the post-test scores. We also have the overall score on the APERS. And what we saw was a 31% increase in program quality from the pretest score to the post-test score. We also saw improvement in all domain areas. As you note, looking at this graph, every blue bar exceeds the score of every red bar in every case. We saw the greatest improvement in communication, functional behavior, and personal independence. We also saw improvement in the areas of transition planning and the use of structure and schedules. These areas were important to us to observe because these represented the areas that were most often targeted by the classrooms where the assessment took place. To help the divisions even further, we noted that scores lower than 3 were scores that indicated needing improvement. On the chart before you, I've highlighted these scores in red. Scores highlighted in yellow indicated proficient practice in that domain, and I've highlighted these on the chart before you as well. Finally, the scores highlighted in green indicated areas where there was exemplary practice. I want you to notice that from pre-test to post-test condition, we eliminate all of the red areas, the needs improvement areas. That is, through 3 years of intervention with VCU Autism Center for Excellence, these school divisions were able to improve practice to the degree that they were able to eliminate all needs improvement areas. We completed some statistical analysis on these pre-test, post-test scores by completing t-tests. Every single score improvement was significant. In fact, all but one score was significant at the 0.000 level. That's highly significant. And further, one of our red scores, functional behavior, moved from needs improvement to exemplary within 3 years of intervention. All of the red scores otherwise moved from the needs improvement to the proficient area within the measurement. We also moved from having only 2 green scores, exemplary, to having 6 scores in the exemplary area. In other words, the divisions that I just described from across Virginia, representing both rural and urban and suburban, representing all types of classrooms, self-contained and inclusive, and at all grade levels, moved from basically significant needs for improvement to proficient, and in most cases above proficient. These findings are pretty significant in that what they resulted in were major changes for the programs themselves and for the schools in question. It also resulted in a significant change in teacher attitude. Teachers began the project feeling stressed and not confident when they provided supports for individuals with autism spectrum disorders. And yet by the end of 3 years, they were extremely confident when it came to providing supports for individuals with autism spectrum disorders. In fact, here are some additional accomplishments that occurred as a result of this project. The Arlington County Public Schools developed a nationally recognized family resource binder. You can access that by going to their website and looking for their family resource binder. It contains tremendous information for families and also contains ways for the families to keep track of the records that they receive from the school on behalf of their child throughout their school years. We saw that a high school program in Botetourt County developed a summer high-quality integrated social skills program for their high school students with autism spectrum disorders. In this program, students with disabilities and their peers without disabilities interacted and learned social skills together through summer activities that were really pretty highly motivating for the students involved. We also saw the development of elementary and middle school social skills programs in numerous counties and cities throughout Virginia. These programs were conducted both in the classroom themselves and also through clubs in middle schools for students who were seeking to learn more about interacting with their peers. In all of these models, there was both a direct instruction phase and an inclusive phase so that the students practice their social skills with their peers who are typically developing. We saw the development and use of communication devices using high-tech and low-tech means across all divisions in which we interacted. In fact, communication improvement was a major area where we saw significant change for all of the programs involved. We were able to see increases in inclusive opportunities for all grade levels for all students involved in the program. And we also saw increased achievement on standardized tests in the divisions where we provided support. We saw decreased out-of-division placement in high-cost private schools because the programs themselves, the teachers, the school divisions became confident in their abilities to provide services and supports to their students with autism spectrum disorders. In fact, in a number of different school divisions where we intervened, we saw students transition from private schools back to their public schools with adequate supports and highly skilled teachers able to meet their needs. We saw increased professionalism and communication between paraprofessionals and their supervising teachers. As we implemented and demonstrated standards for quality, even paraprofessionals were able to implement high-quality programs for students with autism spectrum disorders. And finally, we saw one of the nation's only high school charter programs for students with significant disabilities developed in Richmond City Public Schools. These changes resulted in increased access to training and coaching across school divisions because now the schools knew what their teachers needed and how best to meet those needs through the use of the Autism Program Environment Rating Scale. We saw increased social interaction between students with ASD and their peers without disabilities, and increased collaboration between families and school division personnel. And finally, we saw the development of a number of high-quality documents, including complete social skill curricula for elementary and middle school students and their teachers. We're in the process of developing these documents further and releasing them on our website. In fact, right now, our state communication team has developed an expansive array of communication resources available on our website. To further tell you more about the changes that we saw, I have two graphs before you right now. These graphs show a picture of what happened in one classroom. And according to the Autism Social Skills Profile, this classroom provided a pre-test and a post-test to assess whether or not their social skills program was making a difference in the lives of their students with autism spectrum disorders. In this classroom, they completed a pre-test and a post-test on appropriate social behavior at the beginning of school, followed by the post-test at the end of school. And then we saw pre- and post-test scores on inappropriate behavior. In the interim, the students attended social skills classes and engaged in social skills club activities with typically developing peers for the 9 months that school was in session. What we saw was a significant increase in social skills for the students who participated in this group, and a equally impressive, perhaps even more impressive, decrease in inappropriate behaviors by these students in the same classroom. In other words, the model that we were using by using the APERS became a model for these schools to use with all of their students when completing their strategic plan to implement social skills practices. Moving into Cohort 2, we've now added 6 new divisions to our Autism Center for Excellence Technical Assistance Embedment Project. These divisions include Alexandria, Bedford, Chesapeake, Franklin, Spotsylvania, and Warren County. As you can see, we're expanding our reach across Virginia to include the northern Shenandoah Valley and further into the central region of Virginia, just east of the Blue Ridge Mountains. In closing, I want to make clear how important it is to work with assessment prior to the development of division, classroom, and teacher goals. Otherwise, your ongoing program improvement and division efforts to improve practice are going to be short-circuited by the lack of focus and vision on strategic planning. Assessment enables the deployment of the resources that will lead to lasting change within the division itself. By using an assessment to guide professional development resources, it's important to keep in mind that your goal is to make sure that the teachers have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to provide the practices that the students need, not the latest fad. And so by using the Autism Program Environment Rating Scale, you're able to track progress in a number of different very important areas that address general classroom environment and those autism-specific needs. Finally, changes in key areas appear to result in an improvement in all areas. In fact, these school divisions did not target every single area on the APERS to ensure improvement, and yet we saw significant improvement in all areas on the APERS. I think that's a really important point. Mostly, the school divisions addressed these 5 different areas, the domains from the APERS. And yet, in addressing these 5 domain areas, they saw improvement in all areas. By improving a little bit, they got a lot more improvement in their programs and in their classrooms. That alone led to confidence. The teachers felt like they had a direction, they had support, and they had a clear understanding of what they should be doing to provide a quality program for students with autism spectrum disorders. The results speak for themselves. This was a very successful 3-year project for them. They continue, by the way, to use the APERS to assess their program improvement and to set new goals for their division. In closing, I want to emphasize how important assessment is. Through assessment, school divisions are able to target their resources toward those areas where they would get the most improvement in programs and in outcomes for students with ASD. Assessment really enables the deployment of resources and the development of lasting change. In fact, the divisions with which we worked mainly targeted these 5 areas from the Autism Program Environment Rating Scales. Despite only targeting 5 of the 11 different domains, they saw significant improvement in all domains. This is an indication that by targeting some areas, you can get much more bang for your buck. Change is hard, and using assessment to guide change really improves the outcomes and improves the success of the project overall. For more information about the Autism Program Environment Rating Scale, be sure to look at the National Professional Development Center on Autism Spectrum Disorders at the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute, or contact Dr. Ann Cox at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. For VCU ACE, this is Carol Schall. Thank you.